All right, deep divers, buckle up, because today we're diving into Leprechaun 2. You know, that wonderfully weird horror comedy. We've got some interesting stuff here, online notes about the movie. Not your typical deep dive material, but I think this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting about this sequel? It flips the script on what we saw in the first Leprechaun movie. Like, they took this mischievous little killer and dropped him right into L.A.
Yeah. They took a ridiculous idea and just cranked it up. One of the first things that stood out to me was the tone. This one's way more comedic while still having some pretty creative kills.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's clever, too, not just slapstick. Like, remember that scene where he uses his pot of gold to yank out the guy's tooth?
Mhm.
Gruesome, sure, but also kind of darkly funny. It's memorable. Almost like they're playing with what we expect from horror, you know?
Absolutely. Those unexpected moments make Leprechaun 2 unique. Silly and over the top, but still manages to be scary. It's a tightrope walk between laughs and fear, and it works.
Before we get too lost in the mayhem, though, let's set the scene. Our little antagonist this time isn't after just gold. He's searching for a bride. And not just any bride, one tied to this thousand-year-old curse. Adds a whole new layer to the story, wouldn't you say?
Totally. It's so cleverly woven in, you know? We get a glimpse of 10th century Ireland, all this magic and curses, and then boom, we're in modern day LA.
A stark contrast, right? It shows how timeless this leprechaun's curse really is.
And that contrast is reflected in the leprechaun himself, this ancient being bound by tradition, driven by revenge. But also, he's navigating the modern world with this mischievous, almost childlike glee. It's that duality that makes him such a fascinating character.
He's like this force of nature, pure chaos, but with a twinkle in his eye. Speaking of bringing this mischievous menace to life, Warwick Davis, right? He just owns this role.
Absolutely. Davis isn't just playing a character, he becomes him. He brings this charisma to the leprechaun.
Yeah.
Terrifying and hilarious at the same time. It's not just the lines, it's his movements, his expressions, everything. He's fully committed, and it shows for sure. You know, it's interesting to think about the budget, too. It was pretty modest, so they couldn't rely on fancy CGI. They had to be creative with practical effects, and that forced Davis to really bring the character to life through his performance.
You know, that's a really good point, and those practical effects are a big part of the film's charm. Like that scene where he shrinks to fit through a keyhole. So over the top, ridiculous. But the way they used forced perspective, brilliant. It's those little moments of ingenuity that showcase the filmmaker's creativity.
Yeah, it shows that limitations can sometimes spark creativity. They had to think outside the box, and it resulted in these wonderfully bizarre moments. You just wouldn't get that with CGI.
Exactly. It's that blend of practical effects, comedic timing, and Davis's performance. That's what helped Leprechaun 2 become this cult classic. Because, let's be honest, the critics weren't exactly raving about it at the time, were they?
Not really, but it's clearly connected with audiences over the years. There's something about that quirky, self-aware style that just works. Like they took this ridiculous concept and just embraced it wholeheartedly. That sense of fun is infectious.
You're absolutely right. They're basically saying, we know this is absurd, let's have a blast with it. And that's what makes it so endearing.
We're just scratching the surface of this leprechaun-infested adventure, folks. Stick with us as we delve deeper into the wild world of Leprechaun 2.
Oh, believe me, we're just getting started. There's so much more to unpack here.
Yeah.
Layers to this story, themes hiding beneath this seemingly silly horror comedy. We're going to peel back those layers and reveal the surprising depth of Leprechaun 2. Get ready for some fascinating insights. You know, it's funny how Leprechaun 2 manages to be both laugh out loud and kind of creepy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like they took this inherently unsettling concept. I mean, this creature obsessed with taking a bride and make it hilarious. But there's still that darkness underneath.
Yeah, he might crack a joke while he's chasing his victims, but there's a real ruthlessness to him. He's driven by this need for revenge and this warped sense of entitlement. Like he really thinks he has the right to just take what he wants, consequences be damned.
That's what makes him such a compelling villain.
Wow.
He's not just a cartoon bad guy. He's got depth.
Right.
There's tragedy in his backstory, this ancient curse fueling his rage for centuries.
And Warwick Davis just nails that complexity. The menace, the vulnerability, the humor, the heartbreak. It's a really nuanced performance.
He really does. You're scared of him, but you also kind of feel bad for him. It's morbidly fascinating, you know? You can't look away.
Exactly. That's what makes Leprechaun 2 more than just a silly horror movie. It gets under your skin, makes you think about obsession, revenge, the consequences of holding on to anger for way too long.
It's like these universal themes wrapped up in this entertaining, thought-provoking package. You're laughing one minute, and the next you're pondering the meaning of it all.
Speaking of meaning, what about the legacy of Leprechaun 2? Not a universally acclaimed classic, but definitely a cult film. Why do you think this movie has resonated so strongly with people?
Well, part of it, I think, is that it embraces the absurd. It just is what it is, a fun, over-the-top horror comedy. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's refreshing, especially in this genre.
For sure. And that self-awareness is key. It's like they're winking at the audience saying, hey, let's have fun with this crazy idea. It's that invitation to embrace the ridiculousness that makes it work.
And you know what? It's like they gave other filmmakers permission to play with the genre too, to experiment, to push boundaries. I mean, we might not have movies like Shaun of the Dead or Tucker and Dale versus Evil without Leprechaun 2 paving the way.
And Leprechaun 2 also had this broader impact on horror comedy in general. It helped make the idea of funny horror normal, that scares and laughs can go together.
Yeah. Leprechaun 2 came out in 94, and then in the late 90s, early 2000s, we saw this boom in horror comedies. Movies like Scream, Shaun of the Dead, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. They all owe something to those early films like Leprechaun 2.
It's like it created a space for filmmakers to play with genre, subvert expectations, to bring humor into even dark themes, which ultimately gave us a more diverse and engaging horror landscape.
You know, we talked about the practical effects earlier. This was back when CGI was still pretty new. Filmmakers had to rely on physical props, makeup, clever camera work. I think that really adds to the charm of Leprechaun 2.
Oh, absolutely. There's a tangible quality to it. Like you can almost feel the weight of the leprechaun, the texture of his skin, that glint in his eye. It's a realism that CGI often misses.
For sure. And remember that scene where he gets hit by the roller coaster? They used a miniature puppet.
Well,
So creative, so effective. It's those little things that make practical effects so memorable.
you can see the love, the attention to detail. It's like a form of art.
Totally. It's true artistry, bringing these things to life physically.
It takes so much skill, creativity from everyone involved. They had limitations, but those limitations pushed them to find ingenious solutions. That resourcefulness is part of what makes Leprechaun 2 so unique.
And speaking of unique, we gotta mention Clint Howard's cameo. So random, so delightful.
Right, like a little Easter egg for cult film fans. It's those unexpected moments, the humor, the strangeness, that make Leprechaun 2 such a unique experience.
So we've got a film that's funny, scary, thought-provoking, visually inventive. It's earned its place in the hearts of horror fans, and it's left its mark on both the franchise and the genre. Not bad for a movie about a wisecracking leprechaun looking for a wife, right?
Not bad at all. One of the key takeaways here, I think, is that even those ridiculous films can have a real impact. Leprechaun 2 reminds us it's okay to let loose sometimes, to embrace the absurd, to have a good laugh, even when things are scary.
Maybe this deep dive has inspired you to revisit Leprechaun 2, or to check out some of those other horror comedies we talked about. There's a whole world of movies out there waiting to be discovered.
Go out there and embrace the unexpected, folks. You never know what treasures you'll find outside your comfort zone.
And on that note, we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through Leprechaun 2. Until next time, happy viewing.
Okay, deep divers, we're back for the final part of our Leprechaun 2 journey. We've laughed, we've cringed, we even pondered the deeper meaning of a leprechaun looking for a wife. But before we say goodbye to this movie, let's talk about its impact on the franchise.
You know, it's amazing how this sequel really set the stage for all the crazy adventures that came after. It's like Leprechaun 2 gave him permission to just go wild with the concept.
Right, they were like, okay, we know he can be scary and funny, so now let's just see how far we can go. And boy, did they ever.
Oh, for sure. Leprechaun in the Hood, Leprechaun in Space. They took that horror comedy mix to a whole new level. Those movies might not be for everyone, but they definitely have a cult following. Yeah, and I think that's partly because of what Leprechaun 2 did. It showed that people were into the silliness, the over-the-top gore, the pure ridiculousness of it all. It's like it created this whole subgenre of horror comedy where anything goes.
And don't forget the impact on horror comedy in general. Leprechaun 2 helped make it okay for horror to be funny without losing the scares. That humor could actually make the tension and suspense even better.
Think about it. Leprechaun 2 came out in 94. Then, late 90s, early 2000s, this huge wave of horror comedies hit. Scream, Shaun of the Dead, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. They all owe something to those early films, like Leprechaun 2.
Leprechaun 2 made it okay to play with the genre, to mess with expectations, to bring humor into dark themes, and that gave us more variety, more interesting movies for horror fans.
So as we wrap up, what's the verdict on Leprechaun 2? It's silly, gory, charming, and surprisingly thought-provoking. It's entertained people for decades, spawned all those sequels, and even helped shape horror comedy as a genre. Not bad for a movie about a leprechaun trying to get hitched, right?
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest takeaways here is even seemingly ridiculous films can have a real impact. Leprechaun 2 is like a reminder that it's okay to let loose, embrace the absurd, to laugh, even when you're scared.
Maybe this deep dive made you want to watch Leprechaun 2 again, or maybe check out some of those other horror comedies. There's a whole world of movies out there.
Go explore. Embrace the unexpected. You never know what you'll find.
And on that note, we're out of here.
Thanks for joining us on this Leprechaun 2 adventure. Until next time, happy viewing.